Hello friends, welcome to Real Learning Center. Today we are going to discuss about how do plants get water and minerals. We have seen about the leaf, the stem and many other parts of the plant, and no part of the plant is actually helping the plant to get water and minerals. So what is that part of the plant which is actually helping the plant to get enough water and minerals for its growth? If we really are trying to study about that, we are actually studying about the underground world of the plant system, and that is our root system of the plant. The root system of the plant is the most actively involved part which provides water and minerals for the plant. You can see very well how the roots are growing and it absorbs water, and you can see how the plant will absorb this water and it starts growing. Notice one thing here, that when the roots are actually growing, they are moving towards water. They always move towards water and they are not moving towards the surface of the earth, but they are going to the center of the earth. So this root system shows a very different type of movement. One which is moving towards the water, which we call as hydrotropism, and one which is going into the soil, which we call as positive geotropism. So roots are the ones which gives plant the water and the minerals it needs. But you should not be surprised to know that it not only absorbs water and minerals, it also helps in giving the support that the plant needs. It anchors the plant. That's the reason why a plant can stand steady even if there is heavy rain or heavy wind, because the plant is firmly attached to the soil through its roots. You might not see the roots, but you can see how beautifully it is gone deep inside the soil and it is supporting the plant system. Now, if you by chance try to pick any plant, you would generally see this kind of structure where there are some kind of roots that you can see. But many times if you pluck a plant, you can see some kind of beard like structure that a plant has. Now this plant which is having the roots here, we call this root as the tap root system, and here we call this plant as the fibrous root system. Now just to show you people how the tap root looks, I just plucked few plants, took a nice photograph of the plants from my garden, and here is the picture of the tap roots that I have taken. If you can see these two pictures and observe it carefully, you can see that both of them have one very strong, very important and very basic structure in the center of the root system. Now this root which is at the center and which is kind of the tallest amongst all the roots, we call that as the primary root. Surrounding this primary root, you can see some small roots which comes out, and this these roots which comes out lateral to this primary root, we call them as the secondary roots. Okay, many times you see that the secondary roots will grow out of much smaller hair-like structures as roots, and we call them as root hairs. So whenever we are talking about a tap root system, you see that there is one primary root. To this you can see many secondary roots, and you can also see small hair-like structures which is called as the hair root or the root hairs. The other kind of root which I was talking to you about was the fibrous root. Now the fibrous root is slightly different from that of a taproot. Now these pictures again from the plants taken from my garden, you can see that there is no primary root at all. From one single point, you can see that there is a tuft of small fibers, small roots that come out. Now this tuft of roots which are all originating from a single point, such root system is called as a fibrous root. Now in huge roots with a fibrous root system, you can also see the presence of root hairs. But you cannot say that it always has a primary root and secondary root. That is not there, because majority of the roots you see there are all fibrous roots. Now, let me ask you one question. The question is, root is somewhere deep inside the soil, and if I really want to know whether the plant has the taproot or the fibrous root, how am I actually going to find it out? Yes, the obvious reason would be plug the plant, see the root, you will get to know if it has a primary root, a secondary root, you call it as taproot. If it does not have the primary root but you have tuft of roots that are formed from one origin, you can call it as fibrous root. But what will happen to the plant? In the process we are killing that. Or imagine I have a coconut tree and I want to find out how its root system is. Do you think I can go and pick out a coconut tree and see how the root system is? Maybe. At least with this human framework, I don't think that is possible. But just by looking the shoot system, which we have studied all this time, we can easily find out if the root is taproot or fibrous root. Let us quickly recap what we have learned about some of the important points when we were discussing about the seed and the leaf. When we discussed about the seed, we told that the seeds can be of two types. One is monocot, one is called as dicot. We can break the seed equally into two halves, which we call as dicot. Sometimes we cannot break it open and we call it as monocot. And we also spoke about different structures present inside the seed, and we told that there will be only one cotyledon in monocots and there will be two cotyledons in a dicot. So based on that, we have the monocots and then we have the dicots. Right? When we were speaking about the leaf and leaf structure, we spoke about one very important concept which was called as venation. There was this banyan leaf which we kind of easily tore apart, and we said that this has a parallel venation, whereas if I take a people tree leaf or anything like that, to tear it equally into half, it is very difficult because they have a reticulate venation. Yes. Now, just by looking at what kind of seed the plant has, and what kind of leaf the plant has, we can very easily identify, we can very easily tell what is the root that is present beneath the soil. Mostly, you see that if there is a monocot plant, we always associate with the fibrous root. All the monocots will have the fibrous root present here, and if you are talking about any dicot, the dicots will always have the taproot. So it's not always necessary to pluck the plant and see the root, but we can just look at the seed, we can look at the venation, we can look at the flowers, and we can very easily tell what kind of roots can be present in different types of plants that we see around. Now, let us come back to the original question. How do plants get water and minerals? I told you that the water and minerals are obtained from the roots. But how exactly the roots are helping the plant to absorb water and minerals? Now, for this, what I will do is I am going to use a powerful microscope, and And using this powerful microscope, I am going to see what is inside this root, and I will actually find out how the water and minerals are entering inside this root system. When I am doing this, you see that this root has cells. Okay, so that part is the outside of the cell, and this is the inside part of the cell. So we always know that the cell has an outer membrane which is called as the plasma membrane and the cell membrane. So we have the cell membrane of the root here. Outside of that would be the cell, outside surface of the cell, outside region of the cell, and this would be the inside of the cell. Now, if anything has to come inside the cell, it has to come through a gate. Just like whenever I want to enter into the house, I enter through the door. We have some kind of a gate that is present, which is on the membrane of the cell. Now, on the membrane of the cell, I have this small gate which kind of opens and closes. So, outside, I see there is lot of minerals present. Minerals are present in the soil. Now, these minerals are kind of entering into the cell through the gate. So, we call this as gated proteins. These are all proteins, so we call them as gated proteins or protein gate. So, the minerals are entering into the cell through these gates, which we call as the protein gates. But it's not so easy. You know, the cell has to spend some energy to get the minerals inside. It will spend lots of energy, and because it spends energy, we call this type of movement where energy is spent as active transport. We call it as active transport. Now, once the minerals come inside, how do water molecules come inside? Now, the entry of water molecules is slightly a different story that we observe. And this story is kind of similar to active transport, but here we don't use energy. This process, here you see that there is no energy involved, and there is water molecule simply that keeps moving inside the cell. But how does this happen? Now, this happens because of a very, very strong natural phenomena. And that natural phenomena is that, you know, whatever we are talking about in nature, it should always be some kind of equality. Okay? Now, in nature, we see that the water which is there outside the root should also be, you know, equal to the inside of the cell. So, the water concentration inside the cell and outside the cell should be the same. Okay. So, what would happen is, we have seen that there is this cell membrane that was there in the cell. Now, this cell membrane has very, very small pores. The purple colored pores that you are seeing on the surface here is actually the small kind of pores which will allow only few things to enter inside and outside, but does not allow all the molecules to come through. Okay, it is it's kind of filters. It will allow only few molecules to come inside, whereas it will not allow all the molecules to come through them. Now, this kind of membrane, which will allow few of them to come freely, few of them not to come early, we call such a membrane as semi-permeable membrane. Semi meaning partial or half and half, and semi-permeable, which will allow few of them to pass through. Okay, so this membrane here is actually a semi-permeable membrane which allows few things to pass through. And you can also see that this purple colored gate is much, much smaller than the green colored rounds there. Now, whenever the water is coming inside, you know, it will allow only the water molecules inside, but will not allow any salt, which is actually the solute. Okay, it will not allow the salts or any other big molecules inside. So the solutes are not allowed inside. Only the water molecules which are more outside the cell are entered inside the cell. Now this process is called as osmosis. Now osmosis, in osmosis, we see that the water molecules enter only when there is a concentration change of the water molecules, which means to say that the water molecules outside the cell, only if that is more than the inside, then the water molecules enters inside the cell. Now maybe you can kind of correlate why the stem is actually helping the water to quickly transport the water to the leaves, because as soon as the water molecules in the root increases, it is transported to the leaf, so that the water in the root is always lesser. Therefore again the water molecules from the soil enter into the root, and thus this is a kind of continuous process. Now after we study about the active transport and osmosis, one thing we should know is that for osmosis we don't need energy, and it is a continuous process which helps in the water transport, and we have the protein gates which help in the movement of all the minerals that the plant requires. Thus the plant gets water and minerals, both of them, from the soil. However, when I'm talking about all this minerals, there is one very important food component which the plant does not get, and that is nitrogen. Now to get the nitrogen for the plant, you know what the plant does? The plant develops friendship with bacteria. The plant develops friendship with bacteria. The nitrogen which is present in the atmosphere, it cannot be taken up by the plants at all, because the plants need some kind of soluble form of nitrogen from the soil. Now who is going to give a soluble form of nitrogen for the plant? Now that is given by few bacteria which is there in soil. Maybe you would have seen this kind of plant. When you pluck a plant, you would have seen the small kind of tuberous structures that are present on the plant, and this we generally call it as root nodules. Suppose you take a methi plant, or suppose you take a groundnut plant, and you open it and you can see this kind of small tubers that are present on the root surface. Okay, have you ever wondered why these tubers, why this are formed on the surface of the root? Now that is because that is the house which is given by the plant for the bacteria. So you see, if I just take one of these strands and observe it very closely, it looks something like this. I just take one strand, you can see some small globules on the surface. Now these small globules on the surface is called as nodules. Okay, they are called as nodules. Now these nodules are actually the houses where the bacteria lives. Okay, let us do one thing. We will just take one of these small nodules and observe it under a microscope. You see a structure like this. Now this bacteria which is there here is actually kind of helping the plant to give nitrogen. So nitrogen which is there in the atmosphere cannot be taken. The nitrogen which is in the soil is not absorbed by the plants. So this bacteria will kind of absorb the nitrogen from the soil and gives it to the plant. So this way the bacteria helps the plant to get nitrogen. But please notice it here that the bacteria is also benefited. Okay, when the bacteria is inside this root nodules, you see that the bacteria is getting its safest environment to be present on the plant. It is getting its house, it is getting its shelter. So this way the plant is helping the bacteria is helping the plant. Now this is kind of a symbiotic relationship. Symbiotic relationship is any kind of relationship between two organisms where both the organisms are getting benefited. Here the plant is benefited, the bacteria is also benefited. So this kind of relationship is called as the symbiotic relationship. So this way the plant is able to get all the nutrients, all the minerals and the water that it requires. So this ends and concludes our fruit to root series. In this series, we started our study by studying the fruit. We found out why actually plants and trees make fruits. It's not only to give for us, but we found out that there is some kind of hidden message that the plant wants to tell, and it was about the seed which all the fruits had. So there was the seed which was present inside the fruit. This seed is a very important factor because it is only through the seed that the plant can kind of propagate itself, can continue its life itself on this earth. We saw what are the different types of seeds. We cut open the seeds and saw how beautifully there are two parts which actually gives rise to root, one which gives rise to shoot, and we saw all that beautifully in the seed. Now these seeds which we spoke about actually came from flower. We found out why the flowers are actually so colorful, so fragrant and so attractive. It not only attracts human beings, it attracts insects, birds and bees, and it is actually getting benefited because it helps in pollination and it helps in formation of seeds, thus giving rise to fruit and thus giving rise to baby plant. After we studied about the fruit, the seed and the flower, we studied about the leaf. Now in leaf, we studied about how intricately the plant will trap sunlight, will absorb carbon dioxide and will also take in water which is coming from the roots, and all this is mixed up to make carbohydrates and the food, and the plant is very happy with that. And not only plants, we are also happy with that because we are all surviving, eating that food which the plant produces. After we spoke about the leaf, we spoke about the stem. We saw how beautifully the stem, which is so huge, is efficient in transporting water from the root system to the shoot system. We saw that this water which is taken from the soil, from the root, is transported to such heights, and all because of small tube-like structures which are present in the stem. We call them as the xylem. Now after we studied all that in our previous videos, today's session we spoke about the root system. So in the root system, we spoke what a primary root was, what a secondary root was, and how this root system actually spreads throughout, goes in search of water, goes in search of minerals, absorbs all of them and sends it to the upper part of the plant, the shoot system, so that they all are able to make the food and propagate. So this is all about the fruit to root series. Keep watching for many more interesting series in chemistry, biology and physics, and altogether science. Thank you.